I didn't know the moment a man decides you belong to him could feel this quiet. It started like any other shift, the kind that blurred together under dim amber lights and the low hum of conversations I wasn't paid to remember. I wiped down the counter for the third time in 10 minutes, more out of habit than necessity, watching the reflection of neon signs ripple across the polished wood. Midnight in Brooklyn meant regulars nursing cheap whiskey, a couple arguing softly in the corner, and me, Lucas Hayes, pretending this was enough. It was enough. It had always been enough. Until the door opened. I didn't look up right away. You learn not to. New customers come and go, and eye contact only invites trouble, tips, or something in between. But the air shifted. Not colder, not warmer, just still, like the room had taken a breath and forgotten to let it out. My fingers paused on the glass I was drying, just for a second. Then I looked. He wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. Dark coat, tailored like it belonged in a different world than this place. Posture straight, controlled. The kind of presence that didn't ask for space, it assumed it. People moved without realizing they were doing it. Chairs scraped lightly. Conversations dipped, then tried to recover. I told myself he was just another customer. Just another man with money and somewhere better to be. But he didn't look around like he was deciding where to sit. He looked at me. Direct. Unblinking. Not curious. Not impressed. Just certain. I swallowed, turning back to the counter like I hadn't noticed. Like I didn't feel it. That strange pull tightening low in my chest. "What can I get you?" I asked when he finally reached the bar, keeping my voice even, casual, like I'd done this 1,000 times. Because I had. He didn't answer right away. I felt it again. That pause, that silence stretching just a little too long. Then, quietly, "You're new." I almost laughed. "Been here 2 years. A beat. Not new." His voice was calm, measured, like every word had already been decided before he spoke it. I glanced up despite myself. Big mistake. His eyes didn't soften when I met them. Didn't shift away. They stayed, locked on. Mine, like he was filing something away. Like he was memorizing. My grip tightened on the glass. "Drink," I prompted. He leaned slightly against the bar, close enough now that I caught a faint scent. Clean, sharp, something expensive I couldn't name. "Whiskey," he said. I poured it without asking for specifics. Somehow, I knew he wouldn't correct me. When I set the glass down, our fingers almost brushed. Almost. He didn't reach for it immediately. "Lucas," he said. Not a question. My stomach dropped. I forced a shrug. "Name tag." He glanced down briefly, then back up, unimpressed. Right. The way he said it made my skin prickle. Like he didn't believe me. Like he already knew more than he should. I stepped back, creating space that didn't feel like enough. "Anything else?" I asked. He finally picked up the glass, taking a slow sip, eyes never leaving mine. Then, almost to himself, "You don't look away." I blinked. "What?" A faint smile touched his mouth. Not warm. Not kind. Just interested. Most people do. Something in my chest tightened. Maybe I'm bad at reading the room. "No," he said softly. "You're not." Silence pressed in again, heavier this time. I forced a laugh under my breath, shaking my head like this was nothing, like he was just another guy passing through. "Well, enjoy your drink." I turned away, focusing on anything else. Orders, bottles, the worn edge of the counter. Anything but him. But I could still feel it. That gaze. Steady. Unmoving. Like he hadn't come here for the whiskey. Like he hadn't come here by accident. And for some reason I couldn't explain, I had the distinct, unsettling feeling that this wasn't the first time he'd seen me. It was just the first time I noticed. By 1 in the morning, I had convinced myself I imagined it. People come in, they stare, they leave. That is how bars work. Simple. Predictable. Safe. I leaned against the back counter, counting tips under the dim light, letting the numbers ground me. 20, 40, 60. Not bad for a Tuesday. My shoulders loosened a little. Normal. Everything was still normal. Then the stool in front of me scraped softly across the floor. I did not need to look up to know who it was. My fingers stilled over the bills. "Another?" I asked, already reaching for the bottle because it was easier than thinking. "You anticipated that," he said. Same voice. Calm. Controlled. Like nothing ever surprised him. I poured the whiskey, careful, precise. No spill. No shake. Occupational hazard. I slid the glass toward him, keeping my eyes on the amber liquid instead of his face. But I felt it again. That focus. Like standing too close to a heat source you could not see. "You watch people," he said. Not a question. I let out a small breath, half a laugh. Kind of the job. No, a pause. "You notice them." That made me look up. I did not mean to. I just did. His gaze was steady, unreadable, but there was something else there now. Not curiosity, recognition. Like he had already solved something about me I had not figured out myself. I frowned slightly. You talk like you have been here before. I have. My stomach tightened. I would remember. You did not see me. He said it simply. No ego. No challenge. Just fact. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. That did not make sense. I notice people. I always have. It is how you stay out of trouble. How you know when someone has had too much, or when a situation is about to turn. And yet, I could not place him. Not his face. Not his voice. Not even the way the room seemed to shift around him. That is a little creepy, I muttered, trying to keep it light. He tilted his head slightly, considering me. And yet you are still standing here. My grip tightened on the bar towel. I am working. A faint smile again. Small. Controlled. Of course. Silence stretched between us, but it did not feel empty. It felt full, like something building just under the surface. I forced myself to move, to check on other customers, to create distance that did not really exist. Every step away felt noticed, like he was tracking it. Not in a threatening way, just aware. When I came back, he had not moved. The whiskey glass was half empty now, untouched for the last few minutes, if I had to guess. You are not drinking, I pointed out. I am. Slowly. I am in no rush. Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten again. I set another napkin down, even though he did not need it. Most people are. Most people are not waiting. I stilled. For what? His eyes held mine. Steady. Certain. You. The word landed heavier than it should have. I let out a short breath, shaking my head. Okay, that is definitely weird. But my voice did not come out as steady as I wanted. Not even close. He did not react. Did not push. Just watched. Always watching. Relax, Lucas, he said quietly. If I wanted to make you uncomfortable, you would know. A chill slipped down my spine. Not fear. Not exactly. Something sharper. That is not reassuring. It is not meant to be. Another pause. Then, softer, almost thoughtful. You stayed. I blinked. What? The first time he said. Most people would have looked away. My mind tried to catch up, flipping through half memories, fragments of nights that blurred together under neon and noise. Nothing clicked. Nothing fit. I do not know what you are talking about, I said, a little too quickly. You will. He reached into his coat, pulling out cash, setting it neatly on the counter. More than enough. Always more than enough. Keep the change. I glanced at it, then back at him. You are leaving? For now. For now. Not goodbye. Not see you later. Something in between. Something inevitable. He stepped back from the bar, and just like that, the air shifted again. Conversations picked up. Chairs scraped. The world resumed like it had been paused. But not for me. I watched him walk to the door, every instinct telling me to look away this time. To break whatever this was before it started. I did not. He paused at the entrance, just for a second, glancing back over his shoulder. Our eyes met again. And this time, I understood something I had not before. He was not surprised to see me still looking. He expected it. The door opened. Closed. He was gone. And somehow, the bar felt smaller without him. Like the space he left behind was not empty. Just waiting. The next night, I told myself I would not notice him even if he walked through the door again. That was the plan. Simple. Clean. Professional. I showed up 10 minutes early, tied. My apron a little tighter than usual, and kept my focus locked on anything that did not involve the entrance. Glasses. Bottles. The dull scratch on the counter that had been there longer than I had. Normal things. Real things. Things I could control. By 9:30, the bar was filling up, the usual rhythm settling in. Orders came fast, voices layered over each other, the kind of noise that made it easy to disappear into the job. I leaned into it, letting muscle memory take over. Pour, slide, smile, repeat. It worked. For a while. Then someone sat down at the far end of the bar. Not him. Different guy. Loud. Already halfway drunk. I clocked him in a second, filed him under manageable, and moved on. Another customer waved me over, asking for something complicated I did not feel like making. I nodded anyway, because that is what you do. You keep things moving. You keep things smooth. You do not let anything stick. But something felt off. Not wrong. Just misaligned. Like a song playing half a beat too slow. I wiped my hands on a towel, glancing toward the door before I could stop myself. Empty. I exhaled quietly, annoyed at my own reaction. This was ridiculous. He was just a man. Just a customer. People came and went all the time. They did not linger in your head like this. They did not change the way the room felt when they were not even in it. I turned back to the bar, reaching for a bottle I had grabbed 1,000 times before. My hand missed it by an inch. I stilled. That did not happen. Not to me. I adjusted, grabbed it properly, finished the drink, and slid it across with a practiced motion that felt just slightly off. The customer did not notice. No one did. Except me. And then, like the universe had been waiting for that exact moment, the door opened. I did not look up right away. I refused. I focused on the register, on the numbers, on anything that grounded me in something real. $1 bills. 5s. 10s. But the air shifted again. Same as before. Subtle. Controlled. Unavoidable. My shoulders tightened before I could stop them. I looked. He was already inside. Already halfway across the room. Like he had always been there, and I had just caught up. Adrian. The name slipped into my mind without permission, even though he had never said it out loud. I did not know how I knew. I just did. He did not go to the same seat this time. Did not follow a pattern I could predict. He moved closer. 3 stools down from where I stood. Not too close. Not far enough. My pulse picked up, steady but noticeable, like my body was reacting before my brain had time to catch up. I grabbed a glass, something to do with my hands, something to anchor myself. You came back, I said, aiming for casual and landing somewhere just short of it. His gaze met mine immediately, like he had been waiting for me to speak. You noticed? That same calm tone. That same certainty. I set the glass down a little harder than necessary. You make it hard not to. A pause. Then, softer, almost amused. Good. The words settled between us, heavier than it should have been. I frowned slightly. That is not usually a goal. It is mine. My breath caught for half a second before I forced it out. You always this direct? Only when it matters. My fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. And this matters? He held my gaze, steady, unblinking, like there was no question in his mind. Yes. Silence stretched again, but this time it felt different. Not just full, charged, like something had shifted into place without my consent. I swallowed, looking away first, because I had to. Because if I did not, I had the distinct feeling I would not be able to. What are you drinking? I asked, voice quieter now. Whatever you decide. I let out a small breath, shaking my head as I reached for the whiskey again. You trust me that much? It is not trust, he said calmly. It is preference. I glanced up despite myself. For what? His eyes did not waver. For you choosing. Something in my chest tightened, sharp and unfamiliar. I poured the drink slower this time, more aware of every movement, every second stretching just a little longer than it should. When I set the glass in front of him, our fingers brushed. Not accidental, not quite intentional, just enough to register, just enough to linger. I pulled back first, faster than necessary, my pulse kicking up another notch. He did not react, not outwardly, but his gaze dipped briefly to my hand, then back to my face, like he had filed that away too. Like everything about this moment was being stored somewhere I could not see. Lucas, he said again, quieter this time. Not calling, not asking, just stating. I met his eyes before I could stop myself. Yeah. A beat. Then, almost gentle, do not leave early tonight. My stomach dropped. Why? He held my gaze, that same faint, controlled smile touching his mouth. Because something is about to happen. The room felt smaller again. The noise louder, then quieter, like it was fading in and out around us. I forced a laugh, but it did not land. That sounds ominous. It is not meant to scare you. It is doing a great job anyway. Another pause. Then, softer, you will be fine. I did not know why that made it worse. I glanced toward the door, toward the rest of the bar, toward anything that might make this feel normal again. It did not work. When I looked back at him, he was already watching me. Still. Always still. And for the first time since I met him, I realized something I had been trying very hard not to see. This was not random. This was not chance. And whatever was about to happen, he had already decided I would be part of it. The clock above the liquor shelf clicked over to 11:43, and I had never been more aware of time moving in my life. Every second felt louder than it should. Every glance at the door felt heavier. I kept working, because stopping would mean thinking, and thinking would mean acknowledging the fact that I was waiting. Not for a customer. Not for a rush. For something I did not understand. You are distracted, Adrian said quietly, like he was commenting on the weather. I did not look at him. I am working. Poorly. That made me glance up. Excuse me. His expression did not change, but there was something almost amused in his eyes now. You missed a pour earlier. My stomach dropped. You noticed that? I notice everything about you. The words landed too smoothly. Too easily. like they had been said before, just not to me. I swallowed, forcing a small scoff. That is not weird at all. You keep saying that, he replied, calm as ever. But you are still here. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. Because he was right. I was still here, still standing in front of him, still pouring his drinks, still looking at him even when I told myself not to. That realization sat heavy in my chest, uncomfortable and sharp. I turned away, grabbing a clean glass just to have something in my hands. You said something was going to happen, I said, keeping my voice steady. Should I be worried? No, that is not convincing. It is not meant to be. I let out a slow breath, setting the glass down harder than necessary. You have a very strange way of reassuring people. I am not trying to reassure you. I glanced at him again, frowning. Then what are you doing? A pause. Then, simply, preparing you. Something cold slipped down my spine. Not fear. Not exactly. But close enough to make my pulse pick up again. Before I could respond, the door opened. Loud this time. Not subtle. Not controlled. A group of men walked in, talking over each other, energy sharp and restless. Different from the usual crowd. I clocked it immediately. The way they moved. The way the room shifted around them. Conversations dipped again, just slightly. Not silence. Just awareness. I straightened a little, instinct kicking in. Keep things smooth. Keep things normal. One of them approached the bar, flashing a quick smile that did not quite reach his eyes. Busy tonight? He asked casually. Always. I replied, matching the tone, already reaching for a menu that no one ever read. What can I get you? He leaned against the counter, glancing around like he was taking inventory. Just a drink. Something strong. I can do that. I turned, grabbing a bottle, focusing on the familiar motions. Pour. Slide. Smile. Repeat. But something felt off. The same misalignment from earlier, only sharper now. Like the room was holding its breath again. I set the glass in front of him, and for a second, everything slowed. He reached for it, then paused. His gaze shifted. Not to me. Past me. Toward Adrian. I felt it before I saw it. That shift. That recognition. Subtle. Quick. But real. I glanced back. Adrian had not moved. Still sitting. Still calm. But his attention was no longer on me. It was on them. The air tightened. Invisible but undeniable. The man in front of me cleared his throat, forcing a small laugh. Friend of yours? He asked, nodding slightly toward Adrian. I hesitated. Just a customer. Adrian's gaze flicked back to me for half a second. Sharp. Measuring. Then back to the man. The silence stretched, thin and fragile. Then Adrian stood. Smooth. Controlled. Like he had already decided exactly how this would go. My pulse spiked. You said I would be fine. I muttered under my breath, more to myself than to him. He glanced at me as he stepped away from the bar, that same faint smile returning. You will be. He moved past the man without touching him, without acknowledging him directly, but the space shifted around him anyway. People moved, adjusted, made room without realizing they were doing it. I watched, unable to look away, even though every instinct told me I should. This was not my world, not my situation. I should have stayed behind the bar, focused on my job, pretended none of this was happening. But I did not. I leaned forward slightly, just enough to see, just enough to understand. The man at the bar exhaled slowly, shaking his head like he had just realized something too late. Yeah, he murmured, almost to himself. That is what I thought. I frowned. What? He did not answer, just picked up his drink and took a long sip, eyes fixed somewhere I could not follow. Across the room, Adrian paused near the back, turning just enough for his gaze to find mine again. And this time, there was no question in it. No curiosity, just certainty. Like everything unfolding right now was exactly how he planned it. And somehow, without asking, without warning, he had already pulled me into the center of it. The rest of the night did not return to normal. It pretended to, which was somehow worse. Glasses clinked, people laughed a little too loudly, and the music kept playing like nothing had shifted, but I felt it in every movement. That tight, invisible tension threading through the room, pulling everything just slightly off-center. I stayed behind the bar because that was where I belonged. That was the line. Clear. Simple. Safe. Except it did not feel safe anymore. Not with him here. Not with the way everyone else seemed to orbit around something I could not fully see. I kept my head down, focusing on orders, on routine, on anything that kept my hands busy and my thoughts contained. But my eyes kept drifting. To the back of the room. To where Adrian stood. He was not speaking loudly. Was not gesturing. If anything, he looked almost relaxed, one hand in his coat pocket, posture loose but deliberate. And yet, the men who had walked in earlier were paying attention. Subtle, controlled, but unmistakable. The kind of attention that was not optional. I dried the same glass twice before I realized what I was doing. "You are going to wear that thing out," the guy at the bar said, nodding toward the towel in my hand. I blinked, forcing a small smile. Occupational hazard. He studied me for a second, then glanced past me again. "You always work nights?" "Pretty much. Same shift." "Yeah." He hummed softly, like he was filing that away. My stomach tightened. "Why?" He shrugged, casual, but not really. "Just curious." I did not like that answer. I liked it even less when I realized his attention was not really on me. Not entirely. It kept drifting. Same direction as mine. Toward Adrian. I turned before I could stop myself, just in time to see Adrian step away from the group. Smooth. Controlled. Like whatever conversation had just happened was already finished in his mind. He did not look at them again. Did not check their reaction. He just moved. And somehow, that felt more final than anything else. My pulse picked up as he walked back toward the bar. Toward me. I told myself to stay calm. To act normal. To not react. But my fingers tightened around the edge of the counter anyway. He stopped in front of me, closer than before. Not invading space. Not quite. Just enough to make it impossible to ignore. "You are still here," he said, like he was confirming something. "I told you I would be," I replied, aiming for steady and landing somewhere softer. His gaze flicked over my face. Slow, deliberate, like he was checking for something. "Good." I exhaled slowly. "That is the second time you have said that." "It is still true." I leaned back slightly, creating space that felt thinner than it should. "So whatever that was back there," I nodded toward the room behind him. "That is the thing you said was going to happen?" A pause. Then, simply, part of it. My chest tightened. "I do not like the sound of that." "You are not meant to." I let out a quiet breath, shaking my head. "You keep saying things like that, and I am starting to think you are doing it on purpose." A faint shift in his expression. Not quite a smile. Not quite anything I could name. "I am." That honesty hit harder than it should have. I frowned, searching his face for something I could read, something that made sense. "Why?" He held my gaze, steady, unflinching. "Because you are paying attention." The answer felt too simple, too incomplete. "That is not a reason." "It is for me." Silence settled again, heavier this time. I could feel the weight of the room behind him, the subtle shifts, the way conversations dipped when voices got too close to something they should not touch. And somehow, I knew it was connected. All of it. To him. To whatever had just happened. To whatever was still unfolding. "Those guys," I said quietly, glancing past him, "they knew you." "Yes." And a pause. Then, "And now they know you." My stomach dropped. "That is not funny." "I am not joking." I stared at him, trying to process that, trying to decide if he meant it the way it sounded. "I did not do anything. You stayed." My breath caught again. "That is not the same thing." "It is to them." I shook my head, a nervous laugh slipping out before I could stop it. "Okay, that is not fair. I am just doing my job." "And now," he said calmly, "your job includes me." The words landed heavy, final, like a line had just been drawn without my consent. I swallowed, my pulse loud in my ears. "You do not get to decide that." His gaze softened slightly, just enough to make it worse. I already did. For a second, I could not find a response. Could not find anything that made sense in the space he had just created. I glanced toward the door, toward the rest of the bar, toward the version of my life that had felt simple 24 hours ago. It felt far away now. Unreal. When I looked back at him, he was still watching me. Still steady. Still certain. And for the first time, I understood something that settled deep in my chest. Sharp and undeniable. This was not a moment. Not a coincidence. Not something I could step away from at the end of my shift. This was a decision. His decision. And somehow, without asking, without warning, he had already decided I was part of it. The moment he said it, something in me pushed back. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a quiet, stubborn resistance that settled under my ribs and refused to move. "No," I said, more firmly this time, setting the glass down between us like it could anchor me back to something real. "That is not how this works." Adrian did not react immediately. He did not argue, did not interrupt. He just watched me, that same steady gaze that made it feel like he was listening to more than just my words. "Explain," he said after a beat, calm as ever. I let out a breath, running a hand over the back of my neck. "You come in here, you say things like that, and you expect me to just what? Accept it." My voice stayed low, controlled, but I could feel the edge creeping in. I do not know you. You do, he replied quietly. You just do not realize it yet. That made something twist in my chest, sharp and uncomfortable. No, I said again, shaking my head. That is not how knowing someone works. It is how this works. The certainty in his tone hit harder than any raised voice could have. I stared at him, searching for something I could push against, something that made this feel less inevitable. You do not get to decide things for me. A pause. Then, softer, I already have. The repetition should have annoyed me. It should have made me shut this down, step back, put distance between us, and keep it there. Instead, it landed differently this time. He was not threatening, not pressuring, just stating something he believed was already true. And that was somehow worse. I looked away. First, exhaling slowly as I grabbed another glass, even though I did not need one. You keep saying that. I muttered, more to myself than to him. Like it is already done. It is. I laughed under my breath, but it did not carry any real humor. You have a very interesting definition of reality. I have an accurate one. I shook my head, setting the glass down a little harder than necessary. No, you have a convenient one. That got a reaction. Small, but there. The faintest shift in his expression, like I had said something that actually registered. You think this is convenient? He asked, tone still even, but quieter now. I met his gaze again, something sharper settling into my chest. I think you are used to things going your way. A pause stretched between us, thin and precise. Then, slowly, I am. The honesty caught me off guard. I blinked, thrown off just enough to lose whatever argument I had lined up next. He held my gaze, not backing down, not softening. Just there. Present. Certain. That does not mean this is easy, he added after a moment. I frowned slightly. Then what is it? Another pause. Then, necessary. The word landed heavier than anything else he had said so far. I felt it settle somewhere deep, uncomfortable, and impossible to ignore. Necessary for what? I asked, my voice quieter now, without me meaning it to be. His gaze dipped briefly, like he was considering something, then lifted back to mine. For what comes next? My stomach tightened. You keep talking like this is part of some plan. It is. And I am just in it. You have been from the start. That made my breath catch again. That does not make any sense. It will. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head, trying to ground myself in something logical. You are asking me to trust something I cannot even see. I am not asking. The correction was quiet, gentle even, but it landed like a line being drawn. I stared at him, that same mix of frustration and something I did not want to name tightening in my chest. Then what are you doing? He held my gaze for a long moment, longer than before, like he was deciding how much to say. Then, finally, I am giving you time. The answer surprised me. I blinked. Time for what? To understand. I let out a small breath, some of the tension slipping just enough to let me think again. And if I do not? Another pause. Then, softer, you will. The certainty was back. Not forceful, not loud, just unshakable. I looked at him, really looked this time, trying to see past the control, the calm, the way he seemed to move through everything like he already knew the outcome. And for a second, just a second, I thought I saw something else. Not doubt, not hesitation, just focus. Like whatever this was, whatever he had decided, it mattered to him more than he was willing to say out loud. I swallowed, my pulse steadying just a little. You are very sure of that. I am. I huffed a quiet laugh, shaking my head. You are impossible. That faint shift in his expression again, something almost like approval this time. And you are still here. I glanced around the bar, at the people, the noise, the version of my life that felt like it was slipping just slightly out of reach. Then back at him. Yeah, I admitted quietly. I guess I am. And somehow, that felt like the first real answer I had given him all night. By the time the clock hit 12:30, the bar had thinned out just enough to make everything feel louder again. Not the music, not the conversations, just the space between them. I wiped down the counter slowly, dragging out a task that normally took seconds, because finishing it would mean having nothing left to distract myself with. Adrian had not moved much. He did not need to. His presence filled the space without effort, like gravity that no one could ignore even if they tried. I told myself to focus on closing duties. Cash out the register. Stack the glasses. Lock the back fridge. Normal steps. Predictable steps. But my attention kept drifting back to him, like something in me was wired to track his position whether I wanted it to or not. You keep checking, he said quietly, breaking the silence without raising his voice. I stilled, my hand hovering over the register. I am not. You are. I glanced up, meeting his gaze, and immediately regretted it. There was something different. There now. Not sharper, not softer, just closer. Like whatever distance I had been trying to keep had quietly disappeared without me noticing. You have a habit of pointing things out, I muttered, closing the register drawer a little harder than necessary. You have a habit of pretending you are not doing them. I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head as I grabbed a stack of glasses. Maybe I just do not like being analyzed while I am working. You are not being analyzed. A pause. You are being observed. I let out a quiet laugh, but it did not hold. That is somehow worse. It depends on who is watching. I set the glasses down, turning to face him fully before I could stop myself. And I am supposed to feel better because it is you? He did not answer right away, just held my gaze, steady, like he was weighing something again. Then, simply yes. The confidence in that single word hit harder than anything else he had said all night. I stared at him, something tightening low in my chest, something I did not want to name. You are unbelievable, I said under my breath. And you are still here, he replied, almost gently this time. The repetition should have annoyed me. It should have pushed me further away. Instead, it landed differently again. Like he was not just pointing it out anymore. Like he was reminding me of something I had already chosen. I looked away first, exhaling slowly as I reached for a bottle I did not need to move. You said you were giving me time, I said, keeping my voice low. How much time are we talking about? Enough. That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters. I frowned slightly, glancing back at him. You really do not do specifics, do you? Not when they are unnecessary. I shook my head, a small, disbelieving smile tugging at the corner of my mouth despite everything. You are exhausting. That faint shift again, something almost like approval. You are adapting. I blinked. That is not what this is. It is. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. Because part of me knew he was not entirely wrong. I was still here, still talking to him, still engaging, even when every logical part of my brain told me to step back and shut this down. That realization sat heavy, uncomfortable, and undeniable. The bar quieted further, the last few customers filtering out one by one until the space felt too open, too exposed. I moved automatically, flipping stools onto tables, shutting down sections, going through the motions I had done 100 times before. But nothing felt the same. Not with him still sitting there, watching, waiting. When I turned back, he was already standing. Closer now. Not across the bar. Not separated by that thin line I had been hiding behind all night. My breath caught, just for a second. You are closing, he said, like he had been tracking every step without needing to look. Yeah. My voice came out quieter than I expected. That is kind of how this works. A pause. Then, softer, and then, I frowned slightly. And then I go home. His gaze did not waver. Alone. The question landed differently than it should have. Not invasive. Not inappropriate. Just deliberate. Usually, I admitted, before I could stop myself. Another pause. Then, not tonight. My pulse spiked, sharp and immediate. That sounds less like a suggestion and more like a problem. It is neither. He took a step closer, not crowding, not forcing, just enough to shift the space between us again. It is a change. I swallowed, my grip tightening on the edge of the counter. You really expect me to just go along with that? You already are. The words hit, precise and quiet, settling into something deeper than I was ready to process. I stared at him, searching for the line, the boundary, something I could hold on to that still made sense. But all I found was that same steady certainty. And for the first time, I realized something that made my chest tighten in a way I could not ignore. I was not just reacting anymore. I was anticipating, waiting, and I did not know when that had started. I locked the front door at 12:58, the click louder than it should have been, like it sealed something more than just the end of my shift. The neon sign in the window flickered once before settling into a dull glow, casting reflections across the empty bar that suddenly felt too open. Without the noise to hide in, I turned the key in my hand, then set it down behind the counter, telling myself to move, to finish closing, to ignore the fact that he was still here. He had not rushed me, had not pushed. He just stayed, waiting, like time worked differently for him. I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the back hallway, pulling it on slower than necessary, buying seconds I could not explain. You always take this long. Adrian's voice came from behind me, closer than before. I stilled, my fingers tightening around the zipper. You always stay after closing? I shot back, turning to face him. He was only a few feet away now. No bar between us. No counter. No distance I could pretend meant something. When it matters, he replied. Same tone, same certainty. But here, in the quiet, it felt heavier. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. You keep saying that like it explains anything. It explains enough. I stepped past him, moving toward the back to grab my bag, needing space even if it was temporary. Not for me. It will. The words followed me, not loud, not insistent, just there. I grabbed my bag from the shelf, slinging it over my shoulder a little too fast. You are very confident about that, I muttered. I am precise. I let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but it did not quite land. Those are not the same thing. They are when you are right. I turned back toward him, something sharp flickering under my ribs. And you are always right. A pause. Then, calmly, about this. The way he said it made my chest tighten again. Not defensive, not aggressive, just certain, like there was no version of this where he was wrong. I walked past him toward the front door, stopping just short of it. My hand hovered over the handle, fingers brushing the cool metal without gripping it. I go home, I said, more to myself than to him. That is what happens next. You leave, he agreed. And I frowned, glancing back over my shoulder. And that is it. No, the quiet correction slipped into the space between us like it had been waiting there. I turned fully this time, something in my chest tightening again. You keep doing that. Doing what? Deciding things like I am not part of the conversation. A small pause. Then, softer, you are part of it. Then let me decide. The words came out sharper than I expected, edged with something that felt a little too close to frustration. For the first time, he did not respond immediately. He just looked at me, really looked, like he was considering something he had not needed to before. The silence stretched, but it did not feel empty. It felt deliberate. All right, he said finally. My breath caught slightly. All right. He nodded once. Decide. The simplicity of it threw me off. I blinked, my grip tightening on the strap of my bag. You are serious? Always. I glanced at the door, then back at him, my thoughts scrambling to catch up. This was what I wanted, right? Space. Control. A choice that was actually mine. And yet, something felt off. Like the question had already been answered somewhere I could not reach. If I walk out that door, I said slowly, and I go home, and I do not see you again, that is it. If that is your decision. His voice did not change, did not push, did not pull, just allowed. I stared at him, searching for the catch, the pressure, the hidden expectation. I found none, just that same steady presence. Waiting. My hand tightened around the door handle this time, fingers curling fully around it. Cold, solid, real. I could leave. I should leave. That was the logical choice. The safe one. The one that kept everything simple and contained, and exactly the way it had been before he walked through that door the first time. I pushed the door open. The night air hit my face, cool and sharp, grounding in a way that made my chest loosen just slightly. The street was quiet, familiar, normal. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, the door closing behind me with a soft click. For a second, I just stood there, breathing in the quiet, letting the distance settle. Then I turned. He was still inside, exactly where I left him, watching, not surprised. Not disappointed, just certain, like this had always been part of the outcome. Something in my chest tightened again, sharper this time. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head like I could clear it. This was my decision, my choice. I took a step away from the door, then another, and then I stopped, because the space between us did not feel like distance. It felt like a line I had not actually crossed. I glanced back one more time. He had not moved, had not followed, had not said a word. He did not need to. Because somehow, without him doing anything at all, I already knew. This was not the end of it. Not even close. I made it halfway down the block before I realized I was not actually leaving. My steps slowed, then stopped entirely, my breath fogging faintly in the cool air as the quiet of the street pressed in around me. Cars passed in the distance, headlights sweeping across the pavement, normal life continuing like nothing had shifted. But something had. I could feel it in the way my chest tightened, in the way my mind kept circling back to the same point, the same place, the same person standing behind that door. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair, trying to shake it off. This was simple. I left. That was it. End of story. Except it did not feel like an ending. It felt like a pause, like I had stepped out of something that was still moving without me. My fingers flexed at my sides, restless, uncertain. I took another step forward, forcing myself to keep going. One block, then another. My apartment was only a 10-minute walk. I had done it 100 times. It should have felt automatic, familiar, safe. Instead, every step felt heavier than the last, like I was dragging something invisible behind me. By the time I reached the corner, I stopped again. This was ridiculous. I let out a short breath, shaking my head. You are overthinking this, I muttered under my breath. He is just a guy? A strange, intense, completely unreasonable guy, but still just a guy. The words sounded hollow the second they left my mouth. Because I knew that was not true. Not really. Not anymore. I turned, just slightly, glancing back down the street. The bar was still there, neon sign flickering faintly in the distance. Small. Ordinary. Exactly the same as it had always been. Except it did not feel that way anymore. Nothing did. I stared at it for a long second, my thoughts catching on something I had been trying very hard not to see. He had not followed. Had not stopped me. Had not even tried. He just let me go. And somehow, that made it worse. Because it meant he did not need to. Because it meant he already knew. I exhaled slowly, the realization settling deeper, sharper. This was not about whether I left. It never had been. It was about what I did next. My hand tightened into a loose fist at my side, then relaxed again. I could keep walking. Go home. Lock my door. Pretend this never happened. That I had not felt that shift, that pull, that strange, undeniable awareness that something had already changed whether I liked it or not. I could go back to normal, but the thought felt incomplete, like trying to ignore a question that had already been asked. I let out another breath, slower this time, and turned fully around. The decision settled into place before I could overthink it, quiet but solid. Not impulsive, not forced, just clear. I walked back the way I came, my steps steadier now, more certain with each one. The distance closed faster than it should have, the bar growing larger, more defined, like I had never really left it behind. When I reached the door, I paused for just a second, my hand hovering over the handle again. Same position, same choice, different answer. I pushed it open. The bell above the door chimed softly, the sound carrying through the quiet space. Adrian was exactly where I had left him, standing near the bar, posture relaxed, gaze already on me like he had been expecting this moment down to the second. I stepped inside, the door closing behind me with a soft click that echoed louder than it should have. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched, but it did not feel uncertain. It felt settled. I exhaled slowly, meeting his gaze without looking away this time. This does not mean you were right, I said, my voice quieter but steady. A faint shift in his expression, something that almost resembled satisfaction, but softer. Of course not, he replied calmly. It means you are. The words landed differently this time. Not like a challenge. Not like a claim. Just an acknowledgement. I stepped closer, closing the distance that had felt so significant before, and stopped just short of where he stood. You said this was necessary, I said, holding his gaze. So what happens next? He watched me for a long moment, like he was confirming something he had already decided. Then, finally, now, he said quietly, we begin. And for the first time since I met him, I did not feel like I was being pulled into something I did not understand. I felt like I had just stepped into it on my own.